Yes, the MLB draft is in 2 weeks, but the trade deadline's just after that, and there are teams that are out of it that are looking to see what they can get for some of their star players. I hopped on LockedOn Nationals with our friend Josh Neighbors to talk all about it.
You are Locked On MLB Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Everybody, this is a crossover edition of Locked On MLB Prospects and Locked On Nationals. I am Josh Neighbors, the host of Locked On Nationals. Lindsey Crosby is here. He is the host of Locked On MLB Prospects. Tonight, we will be discussing which Nationals players could be up for, being traded. I mean, which ones aren't, I guess, is the big question.
It might be easier to list the ones that aren't going to get traded.
Honestly, at this point, it is. So Lindsey, it's nice to talk to you again, as always.
Thank you.
We had a successful run last time where we did, Juan Soto trade packages. This one's actually going to be a bit more, I'm not saying it wasn't realistic, but this is a bit more realistic because like a lot of the guys we're talking about are going to at least be in trade talks or are going to get traded. Like the Nationals, they're going to be, I know the quote from Mike Rizzo was, I believe it was cautious sellers was the quote that he had on the Junkies in DC. But I don't know why you'd be cautious when your team is this bad.
Yeah, he said, I would assume that if we're playing at the rate we're playing, we'll probably be careful sellers and make sure that we maximize the players, at least with expiring contracts. So he's telling you, as long as we're losing, I'm shipping all of these expiring contracts out the door.
Yeah, and so the Nationals don't have any guys on multi-year deals outside of Patrick Corbin and Steven Strasburg. And those guys aren't, obviously Steven Strasburg, it's a lot of questions about his future in baseball in general. Patrick Corbin's pitched better lately, but it's not a contract you can move. So you're stuck with that.
And
the rest of the
Strasburg has a full non-trade clause.
Yes, he does. I mean, not anybody would want him at this point in time. I think a lot of the talk, I saw an Athletic article recently that was about, hey, which Nationals players are available, which ones are guys that you think about. There's two guys that I think off the top of my head come, and there's really one that we'll talk about a lot more in depth down the line. But Josh Bell and Nelson Cruz are like the two position players that you have to look at. They've been 3-4 in the Nationals order, kind of in some variation, in some shape or form, for most of the season. And it stands to reason that those two guys are not going to be wearing a Nationals red, white, blue, and sometimes that gray jersey, the City Connect jersey, for much longer.
Yeah. And, I really kind of wish if you could go back and redo everything that Josh Bell kind of got re-signed.
I do too.
It's something where he's having a fantastic year. 318, 399, 514 is the slash line, 12 home runs. He's been worth 3.3 WAR this season. He's having an absolute great season, and you kind of want him to be there for the rebuild. It's just you're trading guys away this year, and you're kind of acknowledging the rebuild's a little farther away than we expected, right? So Josh Bell, Nelson Cruz started off the year slow, has recovered a bit, is looking closer to the Nelson Cruz that we knew. Not what he was, but closer to what he was. And so it's like, okay, what are the packages and what are we trying to get out of moving both of these guys?
Yeah, we're going to spend a lot of time on Josh Bell in a separate show because I think he is very, very fascinating. But Nelson Cruz, so he, I've told you this before, Lindsey, I like to look at months because I think months are nice, large sample size, larger-ish sample sizes that you can usually, you can make some inferences off months, but also there's variance from month to month normally that we get. So Nelson Cruz had a really difficult month of April, 155, 253, 226, 479 on the slash line. Washed would be the word. And also, this is still following too. He has grounded into so many double plays this year. That has been a huge problem for him. But that first month did not look good at all.
Nope.
the changes here, though, and this is where it gets in this conversation about trade value. Like, all right, where is the appraisal of him? Which guy is he? Because in the month of May, 318, 379, 459, 838, 16 RBIs, 2 home runs. And then there's a really nice June where it's 271, 364, 458, 822, 18 RBIs and 4 home runs. You know, that's I don't think he's a 318 guy. I think he's more of the June guy that we talked about. Not a great start to the month of July now, but where do you kind of see Nelson Cruz? It's a guy who's, look, last year he got traded at the deadline. So like, is it that kind of value again? Is it somewhere less? I mean, he kind of is what he is. And I believe he's a guy who's got a mutual option. I think it's what it is for him after the year's over.
Yeah, he has a $16 million mutual option and a $3 million buyout. I see him as close to what he was going to the Rays last year. And part of that is their performance picked up a bit from April to May and then to June. But also, it's kind of the intangibles, right? The leadership, the mentorship qualities. I think about a team, I'm not saying it's going to be them, but think about a team that's younger, that has a lot of younger players and doesn't necessarily have the veteran stalwarts. Cleveland Guardians is a great example. One of the youngest teams in baseball.
Yeah.
Doesn't have a ton of vets. I don't think any position players are over the age of 30. So bringing in a veteran who can kind of help that team in the playoff push would be a reason to bring in Nelson Cruz. And we've seen this happen before. We've seen teams trade for guys that statistically didn't have a giant role, or team sign guys didn't have a giant role, but they had a defined job and they brought some of those intangibles. There was no reason for Albert Pujols to sign with the Dodgers last year, except they used him in a very specific role as a lefty bat off the bench and his leadership on the bench. So Nelson Cruz, similar boat, is going to get you a similar package to what last year.
So and he is a player, you mentioned like the veteran leadership, and like they brought him in because they liked the fact that their young star Juan Soto wanted him to be in DC. But I mean, I guess my one thing is like to that end, like how is that? I mean, I want to know, how has it paid dividends at all? I don't really know if it has. I mean, you keep your star happy, right? But yeah, I think there is something to be said for a team like the Guardians. It's just a matter of how serious do you want to be about a playoff push for the Guardians? Because I mean, Lindsay, they've been consistent about trading people away and not trading for people, even in spots where like they should be.
Yeah, that's the hardest part of this whole thing is figuring out who's going to be the team that's going to go out there and say, yes, we think we're ready to go out and make a push. I mean, right now, Guardians 3.5 games back in the Central. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that they choose, hey, we can go after one of those 3 wild card spots and make the trade. But then there's going to be other teams that either need some sort of production of the DH spot, just need that extra bat in the lineup. I think of the Astros are a team that aren't getting a lot out of that DH spot. So they need somebody. A couple different places. The Blue Jays may want a consistent DH every day versus rotating their position players through. And I actually had the Blue Jays as a good fit for Josh Bell, and we'll talk about that in a later episode. But kind of just a situation where find a younger team, find a team that has a specific need for a DH that can play every day, plug Nelson Cruz in that lineup and see how much better they get. And oh, by the way, you'll probably get something similar to what Minnesota got for him last year, which was Joe Ryan and minor league pitcher Drew Strootman.
And then also, let's talk about some of the other position guys here. Yadiel Hernandez, to me, is a guy that I think could be really useful. What he is a back of the lineup bat that's an aggressive guy. He's looking to drive in runs. It's really what he's trying to do. And I think there's definitely a spot on that. I mean, you think about teams need guys to fill out the lineup, to guys who can make things happen on a playoff push. And look, he's fallen off a bit since the start of the year. But to me, from the position player perspective, Yadiel Hernandez is a guy that I would look at. 266 in the year, 311 on the on base. Obviously, he's not trying to work a ton of walks. 404 slugging, 714 OPS, 5 homers, 31 runs driven in on the year. Will strike out a decent amount, but a guy can be a fourth outfielder for you. Guy can be a pinch hitter for you. I mean, I think he gives you some flexibility, and also, you know what he's trying to do there. He's trying to go up there and try and make something happen. I think there's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah. Aggressive lefty bat off the bench, a fourth outfielder. And then if you're a team that's in a window that has a few years here, you do have, he's on the 1 year minimum now. You have 3 years of arbitration eligibility.
He's like 32 also, which is
he's 34. Like
34.
That's the whole reason. If you're the Nationals, you look at trading somebody with 3 years of team control after this season, is he just won't fit in the window. But you can see a contender going out and saying, hey, well, this is something where, we know we're going to need a bench bat next year too. And we're going to need a like a lefty off the bench, a pinch hitting guy, a fourth outfielder. Let's go get a Yadiel Hernandez. We can throw some, it won't take much. It would probably take, I'd imagine one pitching prospect, somebody who's towards the back end of your top 30. And you now have 3 seasons of Yadiel Hernandez, who's played left, who's played right, who, if I remember right, I think only has 2 errors on the season. I mean, is not a bad defender.
No,
he's not a standout defender, but he's not going to hurt you.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's, I'm with you on that. Back end. Like, I think that's a lot of this is hunting for more pitching prospects, right? Depth. I mean, right now the Nationals have a guy in Jackson Tetrio who's pitching for them in the big leagues, who was not a highly sought after, not a huge prospect for them. And now he's up there because he had a nice year in AAA. And so it's guys like that, like, if you can turn Yadiel Hernandez into a guy who maybe he's a little bit, a little bit better thought of, but just like that minor league pitching depth. I was actually talking to somebody yesterday about it, and there's so much stress in the Nationals right now to hit on Cade Cavalli, to hit on Jackson Rutledge, to hit really on Josiah Gray when they got him. And the more guys you get, the pressure lessens, just so it's like there's more guys who can get opportunities, more guys, that can get opportunities, and not the few guys you have don't just have to hit, because there are some reinforcements.
Yeah, and there's something to be said for increasing the base level of competency of the guys you have. And so if you bring in, and when you trade a Yadiel Hernandez, you're not going to get a top 100 prospect back. You're going to get somebody who he's better than organizational depth, but he's going to be towards the back end of that top 30. You're looking for a guy that can come in who can give you a somewhat stable floor and can give you the runway for some of these pitching prospects to work out. Somebody where, he can go in there and he can give you good innings. Cade Cavalli, Cole Henry, some of these guys, like you said, don't have the pressure to perform right away because there's competency ahead of them and you're not rushing them in before they're ready. So I like that. And then there's a lot of relievers on this team that I think are going to be trade chips, or pitchers in general that are going to be trade chips for teams if they're interested in somebody like a Carl Edwards Jr., veteran reliever, has team control, has playoff experience. That's something a lot of managers always talk about, is they want a guy who's been there before when you get to the playoffs, a veteran in your bullpen. And just about every World Series winning team has had that one 37-year-old in the bullpen that maybe throws 3 innings all series.
Yeah, you mentioned pitching. We'll get to the pitching right here in 1 second. But first, quick word from our sponsors. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Blue Nile and BlueNile.com. If you all are out there looking for that special something, that special someone, Blue Nile can help you out today. Go to BlueNile.com. When you guys do, you guys can shop from their copious amounts of jewelry. It's like a tennis bracelet, or you guys want a necklace, rings, the whole 9 yards. They've got it today over there, and you can make your moments sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com. Locked On Sports listeners get a $50 off deal with a purchase of $500 or more. This is a podcast exclusive deal. Use the promo code Locked On. That's LOCKEDON, Locked On. That's code Locked On. Plus, every order is insured. It ships free and arrives in a discreet package that won't give away what's inside. Shop stress-free and find your forever peace. Go to BlueNile.com today. All right, so this is interesting, the pitching side of things, because the Nationals have their bullpen was so bad last year. And so you get to the argument here, Lindsay. All right, do we want to trade away some of these guys with team control, or do we want to keep them because like we know they can be decent arms? I think Carl Edwards Jr. is an interesting case of this. Now, actually has not pitched. He's actually had a couple outings recently that have not gone as well. But this was a guy that his first outing of the season against the Mets, 1 inning, 3 runs given up. It was rough. But then he ripped off, I forgot, I counted it. It was like 12 or 14 consecutive innings for him where he did not surrender, appearances rather, where he did not surrender an earned run and was really strong. It was 11 in the month of May, where it was consecutive, and then I'm counting real fast.
13 total.
Yeah, 13. So he really did a great job, doing that. Now a couple rough outings in there, but when you have a guy who's used this often, like those will eventually happen. Last 2 have not gone well for him, but this was a guy who, he even mentioned it. He said, look, I'm very grateful for the Nationals because here's the thing. He's not in here on a big, I believe he's on a minor league contract. This is not a guy who's in there, who is sought after by a bunch of people. He feels very indebted to the Nationals and even said, look, if that means I have to go somewhere else to pitch, that's fine because I'm helping out the Nationals organization. I owe it to them because they gave me the chance to get back in the big leagues. And he's been a huge part of the Mets bullpen. I mean, they trust him a lot ever since they brought him up. A guy who's got, once again, as you mentioned, playoff experience. He's 30 years old, so not too old, not too young. I think he's definitely a guy who is going to fetch, not big haul, but obviously I think he's a guy who's going to be on the way out for the Nationals.
Yeah, CJ, absolutely a guy that you can see them moving on from Carl Edwards and just capitalizing on him while he has this value. Another guy that I kind of see in that same boat is a Steve Cishek, another guy who same situation. Like he's old enough where he's not going to fit in the window. 1 year, $1.75 million deal. So you're taking on less than $1 million of money if you pick him up. But a guy that's been, for the most part, reliable on the season. I think he has 34 innings. ERA looks bad, 4.5. But I mean,
he's had some. It's just been like bad outings.
Yeah, like a few blow-ups versus consistently being bad. And so it's something where you take him and his expiring deal, and you can kind of turn him into, a middle, like a middle leverage reliever who, your 7th inning guy, something like that for a contender. That's valuable. That's going to get you stuff back as well. So there's pieces here. The question is, how much do you want to give up from your current roster now that you finally got your bullpen back to competence to prime for the future? And I think Carl Edwards Jr. is an edge case because of he is young enough to contribute when you're competitive. Steve Cishek is definitely a guy who is going to age out of that and probably should go ahead and move on if you can get something for him.
Yeah, and then there's a couple guys also. So the Tanner Raineys of the world, Tanner Rainey and Kyle Finnegan are the 2 guys that I look at, and I say, all right, what do you want to do with Tanner Rainey and Kyle Finnegan? Because Tanner Rainey is an arbitration this year, next year, and the following season. Kyle Finnegan this year, next year, and the following season. These are 2 guys who are 29 and 30 respectively. They have been the back end of your bullpen. But here's the thing is they're probably figured to be more of a 6th, 7th inning guy as opposed to the 8th and the 9th. Maybe somebody uses Kyle Finnegan in the 8th. That's not out of their own possibility. But like I've always thought those guys have been pressed into roles maybe that they're not 110% cool with. I think they've got chances now. Once again, a lot of control over them. So it's a pretty good asset for you to have some bullpen arms. But you have to, maybe you trade one of them, keep the other. I think that's kind of the way I would look at that.
Yeah. To me, it's very much how can you maximize your value for not only right now, but going forward. And it's something where, Finnegan's a guy that for the most part has put up zeros. He'll have, a blow up here where it's 2/3 of an inning, 2 or 3 runs, a third of an inning on, against Colorado on May 29th, where he gives up 4 hits and 2 runs in a third of an inning. But for the most part, he's been rather consistent. And so it's something where you can take it and you can sell it to a team and say, we have him, like you said, we have him a little over his head as far as where he ideally needs to be. We're using him wrong. We need to have him in a lower leverage situation than what we have him in. And really, both guys are in that boat, and you can say, okay, we have one closing. We have, like, right now we have Tanner Rainey as our
Closing, yeah.
closer. As our closer, he probably would better profile as a setup man, and then Finnegan, instead of being a setup guy, should be your seventh inning guy. And the assets that I think you can get from a team that is in a playoff push, that is trying to make one of those final wildcard spots, outweighs the benefit that you're going to have by leaving those guys in the eighth and ninth innings for the next 2 or 3 seasons.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm with you 110%. One more word from our sponsors. Today's show is brought to you by BetOnline and BetOnline.net. Go there today. Check it out. Beautiful, sleek interface, free to sign up. You guys can find odds on all the big league baseball games happening. You guys can probably find odds also on some of the other leagues. I know the Japanese league is always a prominent one to bet on. You guys can find odds also for NASCAR, F1, UFC, boxing, all of that there, and also football, basketball futures too at BetOnline. If you want to bet on where Kevin Durant will go next, you guys can do that. BetOnline and BetOnline.net today. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. All right, so one more guy I want to ask you about is Erick Fedde. This is a guy he's arbitration. He's 29 years old, arbitration 2 and 3 coming up here for him in 2023 and in 2024. Then he's an unrestricted free agent. The thing with him is, he's become an up and down guy. The Nationals do need starter depth, but I mean, at this point with how bad they are, maybe you give up a guy like Fedde to, elsewhere to get some, more organizational depth. And also, I mean, we saw this last year, Lindsay. John Lester turned into Lane Thomas, right? And I mean, and the other day, Mike Rizzo he said Lane Thomas is going to be a part of the Nationals' future. Now, how high of a ceiling he has, I mean, that's up for debate. I kind of see Lane as a fourth outfielder. Still, though, I mean, they he provides some pop. I mean, this is a guy that's like, you're not shocked when you see a 2 home run game from Lane Thomas. So you almost think, all right, is Erick Fedde better off stabilizing the Nationals rotation, being a guy there, or are you better off sending him somewhere else, somewhere that, is a competitive team that needs a fifth guy, that doesn't necessarily want to win this season, but they're a little competitive. They need a fifth arm. They need a guy maybe who can transition to the bullpen as a long reliever once the playoffs happen. How do you think the Nationals should measure that? Because this pitching is always in demand, and he's not Max Scherzer, obviously, but still he's a decent fifth guy to have who's out there every 5 days and can go 100 pitches for you.
Yeah, he averages 5 innings a start, just under 80 innings over 16 starts this year. And it's kind of like you said, I mean, it's a fourth or fifth starter. It's a guy who can get you through, save your bullpen for the most part to get you back to the beginning of your rotation. And then when the playoffs start, he's a option for middle relief if one of your starters has a blow up. And if not, you don't use him, or you leave him off the roster.
Or the Joe Ross situation, right? With Joe Ross had to start a World Series game for the Nationals because of an injury, and it's nice to have a guy like a Joe Ross or Erick Fedde around who, hey, Max Scherzer's back, tightens up, right? And you got to have somebody to go. Throw him in there.
You have a vet with starting experience, and you have arbitration for him in 23 and 24, so you have team control over him as well. I absolutely think that there's value in, given that he's already 29, and like you said, he's not going to make or break your team when you're in the contention window if he is still on the team at that time. But the asset that he brings you, or the multiple assets, could be someone like a Lane Thomas who could contribute, who can make the team better. And what I would like to see is a swap of a younger pitching prospect for Erick Fedde, because we know what Erick Fedde is. We know that he has value in the right situation. Washington's not that situation. Whereas a contending team that has a need for a fourth or fifth starter and then needs that veteran in the bullpen, like you said, if Max Scherzer's back tightens up, all of a sudden he gets a dead arm in the playoffs, I think there's more value there than there is on the Nationals for the next 2 seasons. So I would make that move, and I'm asking for some sort of young pitcher, probably a guy who's in the low minors still, high A,
right?
Or a single A guy. Give him a little bit of time to better fit into that window that we're lking at the Nationals having of a 2 to 3 year window before they contend.
Yeah, I think a team with the Red Sox maybe is a good fit. I actually heard Alex Cora today talking about they had to call somebody up from AAA to make a start for I think Michael Waka, who had dead arm. Obviously, you have a guy like this around, and like the Red Sox kind of always have these guys around who are like the starter kind of long reliever hybrid. I mean, I actually thought Michael Waka would end up transitioning to that long relief role, and he still managed to be a starter still. But this is Tanner Houck's kind of in that mold too. I know he's closing for them, but a guy who started before. I think Eric Fetty might fit into a place like that. All right, Lindsay, this was part one of our show, so we're going to wrap up part one. The next part, folks, all Josh Bell, because he's earned it. He's deserved it. Josh Bell gets his own damn show. All right, Lindsay, where can people find you and your work and all of its variety?
I'm on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. The show's on Twitter at LockedOn Farm. You can follow us on YouTube. We are just short of 1,000 subscribers, trying to get there before the MLB draft, but we've got all of our draft coverage, our previews, our mock drafts, and everything coming up, and we'll be going live on YouTube on draft night to recap rounds 1 and 2.
Right now, I'm using the LockedOn Big 12 account, which some of you guys know that I use. Boom, we just subscribed to LockedOn Prospects. Make sure you guys do that too. You guys can find me on Twitter at @JoshNeighbors_. You guys can find the show at LO_Nationals. You guys can find us wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as well. All right, Lindsay, you and I, part two, time for the Josh Bell celebration episode.